There was no need for Overwatch 2. It was a cash grab marketing scam. A scam.
You guys launch Overwatch 2 with only 3 characters instead of 6 plus because you work on talent trees just to later scrap talent trees and long-form progression. You abandon your core game for 3 years, just turn around the bus and try and make your game live service.
Every time there is a new announcement from the Overwatch development team, it's just bad news.
Overwatch 2 was a disaster. And I know it seems easy to look back and think that now, but there was a time when we couldn't wait for it to come out. So what happened? To find that out, we need to go all the way back to 2020, when Overwatch 2 was announced. People were really excited. Finally, a PvE to expand on all the lore. A new 5v5 format to make the gameplay more fresh. A ton of new maps, heroes, and game modes. And it was even going to be free to play. And you may think all of this sounds great, but this is actually where the problems begin. Because everything they promised ended up being awful. So let's take a look at all the new things that Overwatch 2 promised to have on release. They promised a huge PvE with skill trees, everything, the fucking works. But as I'm sure you already know, it ended up being scrapped completely after the game came out.
With everything we've learned about what it takes to operate this game at the level that you deserve, it's clear that we can't deliver on that original vision for PvE.
And then let's look at 5v5. They made 5v5 because during roll queue, it was impossible to find a game unless you wanted to play tank, because nobody wanted to play tank. So they made 5v5 to only have one tank, which makes it easier for other roles to find games. So they were trying to limit the roll queue. But what they didn't realize was having one tank is awful for balancing, and it makes it impossible. Because what happens is with tank, you either have to make it a fucking raid boss that's impossible to kill, or they're just too weak to do anything. So it's never fun to play tank. And then when you're not playing tank, when you're playing healer or DPS, it's awful too. Because if you're a healer, you're getting dove constantly without another tank to help you. And if you're DPS, it feels like you can do nothing because the tanks are so fucking strong. So that was awful too. Not to mention the launch. On the day of release, it was a disaster. The servers couldn't handle all the players playing. They got hit with a DDoS attack, and pretty much nobody could play the entire day. People were stuck in abhorrently long waiting queues, and it just killed the entire momentum of the game. Because a lot of the people trying to play on that first day were people who came over to check it out because it was free to play, and they wanted to see if it was good now. They probably didn't play Overwatch 1, they didn't pay for it, and they heard of Overwatch being free, so they tried it, and they couldn't get in the game. So most of them probably were like, yeah, fuck this, I'm going back to Valorant, or Fortnite, or whatever. So just right there alone, they lost a bunch of potential players. Another thing they added was the store. They completely overhauled the shop. They used to have loot boxes, where you could either buy some if you wanted to pay money for more of them, or every time you leveled up in the game, you would get a free loot box, and that way, you could realistically, if you tried hard enough, get any skin you wanted with enough time. But now, the way that it works is, it's a free-to-play model, which means they have a battle pass for $10, and if you want a skin, you can pay the price for whatever it is. Usually the good ones are about 20 bucks, and that's the only way. I wouldn't even consider an option of getting free tokens to buy skins, because you don't get any money after you win games anymore. You get a little bit of money if you complete like daily or weekly challenges. If somebody did the math, it would take like 8 months to get just one skin, so it's not an option. Pretty much, if you want a skin, you're paying some money. And then on top of all of this, they promised way more content, so maps, modes, heroes, anything you can think of. They promised more of it, way more of it than we got in Overwatch 1. And don't forget, we waited like 2 or 3 years for this game to come out. So they can't just come out with a little bit, they need to come out with a bunch, and they didn't. After 2 or 3 years of waiting, not only did they not come out with PvE on launch, but came out with like 3 heroes, a few maps, like 1 game mode, and like a few skins. So out of everything we looked at, all the new things that they promised were either awful or just straight up lies, like the PvE. So yeah, on that angle, things are not really looking great. Everything new they tried to add was a total bust. But maybe they learned a few things from their failure with Overwatch 1, so even if the new things that they promised were ass, maybe they could improve on the mistakes that they made with Overwatch 1. So let's take a look at that, shall we? The content updates in Overwatch 1 were extremely slow. In the balance patches, they were awful and slow, so they would take forever to nerf a broken character or to fix a nerf character and buff them. And when they had an awful meta, it would last forever because they took so long to do anything about it, and even when they tried to make a balance update, it was usually terrible, and it didn't fix anything. Yeah, in Overwatch 2, they didn't fix any of that. They promised yeah, we'll be different, we'll do it, we'll change it. No, they didn't. Right when Overwatch 2 released, they went right back to making monthly balance patches and barely giving us any content. Sure, on release, they give you something, like it was a decent amount for release, but you have to remember that was after more than 2 years of waiting, and after that, it was pretty slow again. And the balance patches were awful, especially because of the 5v5. It made it even harder for them to balance properly. And it's gotten so bad that there's a huge counterpick meta, especially with the tanks, where if you don't play the proper counterpick to a tank, you will lose no matter what, because the counterpick is so strong. People will literally go out of spawn, see what tank the other tank is, and then go back and change to counterpick him. That's how important it is, which is not fun to play at all. And the cherry on top of all of this, Overwatch 1, the devs were awful about listening to feedback and listening to the community. I feel like generally, the community has a good sense on who should be nerfed, who should be buffed, like what's a good balance update. And the devs seemed like they would never listen. And it would be so obvious and they just wouldn't do it. It's not like it's rocket science to make some of these balance changes. It's not that hard, which is why it's so frustrating when they don't do it. And of course, you know, they promise to listen to the community more in Overwatch 2, but they don't at all. And the really annoying thing about that is, all of the other problems that I mentioned, I mean the slow updates, the bad balances, they could actually be fixed if they just fixed this one thing. Like, if they just listen to the feedback of the community, then they could actually learn from the mistakes and the things that people are not happy with them about. If they hear the community say, the content is way too slow, can you make more? They'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll try to make it faster. If they hear the community say, we don't like Brig, she's way too powerful, can you nerf her? Sure, we'll nerf her. See, if they just listen to feedback, all of these problems become non-issues. But they don't. Overwatch 2 really feels like that abusive boyfriend that keeps stringing you along by saying, no, don't leave me, please. I'll change, I promise. Just give me one more chance. Blizzard says, we know we're not going to give you any more updates for Overwatch 1, but we promise it'll all be worth it when we give you a huge PvE and a ton of more content for 5v5. Look, I know we said we would have PvE by launch, but it's going to be pushed back just a teensy-weensy little bit. But don't worry about it. It'll be out really soon. You know how we said we were going to give you a full PvE with the works? Well, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. The best we can do is give you some crumbs left over from what we finished already. You know how we said we were gonna give you much more frequent balance and content updates, and that we're gonna be listening to the community? I don't think we can make that happen either. Sorry. Enough of the lies. I'm done with you. And that's how Overwatch 2 turned from a promising second chance to a dumpster fire that left people feeling lied to. Blizzard once had so much goodwill with the fan base, and the players were willing to give them a lot of slack because of how amazing Overwatch was, and could be, if taken care of properly. But with enough lies and broken promises, it's only a matter of time before the community has had enough and says, no, I'm done. No more second chances. I don't believe you anymore.